Welcome everyone to the Canarian International meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Mossy and I am an alcoholic.
I'm I am my name's Mick and I am an alcoholic serving as your secretary today. Please join us for a moment's silence to remember the still suffering alcoholic both inside and outside this meeting. And Jackie.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. 1 second. Now I'll just make it a bit bigger for me. 1 second. Hi, my name is Jackie and I'm an alcoholic. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strengths, and hope with each other, that they may solve this common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop drinking. AA has no dues or fees. It is not aligned with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institutes. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any cause. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.
And you're all very welcome today, guys. There's something missing off my script, but that's nothing new. You're all very welcome. As you know, today is the Old Timers meeting. So we have today Len B with us, and he got sober in 1969, which makes him not a young man. But we're glad to have him here today. Len, you got 40, 45, 50 minutes, whatever it takes. Nobody will stop you. And thanks so much for joining us today. Take it away, my friend.
Thank you. I'm Len Marby, and I am an alcoholic. And I thank you for inviting me over to share my experience, strength, and hope with you people. And my story comes from the big book. And I'm not a drunk-a-log kind of a guy. I'll do a little bit, let you know I do qualify as an alcoholic. I started drinking when I was 14 years old. I couldn't buy it, of course, at that age, so I had to steal it. And I'm not proud of that fact, but it's the way it was. And I lived in a small farming community, and the farmers would come into town in the evenings and buy a supply and put it in the front seat of their truck, and I'd come along a little while later and borrow their supply, and away I'd go, and I'd be set for another day or two. And that carried on for 7 years, from the time I was 14 till the time I was 21, until I got of legal age to buy it. And that's the way I drank. And I wasn't fussy. Whatever they bought, I'd drink. It was just that simple. Uh, there was no hard stuff involved in the early days. After I got old enough to buy it, I got into the hard stuff, and I wasn't one to mix my drinks. If it came out of the bottle, I drank it straight. And it took me to places I didn't want to go, made me do things I didn't want to do, but I still did them. And during those last few years, I met a young lady that I thought would make a good wife, and I started dating her, and we got married in July of 1966. 2 years and 9 months later, she gave me an ultimatum: either you do something about your drinking, or I will do something about our marriage. And I didn't like that, and I knew I had a problem. It wasn't anything that was hid from anybody, but I mean, I was a drunk. That's all there was to it. And I drank when I didn't have to. I drank when I wanted to, and that was just my way of living. I just drank. It was that simple. Anyhow, I eventually found Alcoholics Anonymous through a long-time drinking buddy of mine that had quit drinking, and he quit showing up in the bars, and I didn't know where he went to, and I didn't go looking for him, because I sat in the bar and drank, wondering what the hell was going on, because why did he quit coming to the bar? And he was the guy that ended up carrying the message to me And my very first experience was not great when I went to my first meeting. I walked into a room and there was a bunch of old guys sitting around with white hair, looked like Q-tips to me. And they tried their damnedest to convince me that it wasn't going to work. I was too young, I hadn't drank enough, and on and on and on. And I sat and I listened to this for a while. And in the meantime, I'd read the steps and the traditions on the banners that was hanging on the wall, and something in tradition 3 stuck in between my two ears. And I finally interrupted the argument about whether it was going to work for me or not. And I asked if tradition 3 meant what it said. And they kind of hummed and hawed and said, well, yeah, kind of, it'll work if you've got an honest desire to quit drinking. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, if it means that, I'm staying. And if you don't like it, you can leave. And that was my start in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I hope none of you people had to argue with your way into here, but that's what happened to me. I got involved in a group that went through the first 3 steps, and that's all they did the first 13 months that I was in AA. I wouldn't recommend it. I managed to stay dry, and I won't use the word sober because I hadn't changed my life. But I did stay dry. I never drank again from April the 4th, 1969, until this very day. And I've said many, many times that thank God I've stayed stupid enough to continue to do the things the big book tells me to do. And I know many, many, many people that thought they were too smart and they didn't have to do the things that the big book tells them to do on a daily basis. I don't need to do that. I don't need to do this. I don't, no. Needless to say, there's many of them that's no longer with us. They drank themselves to death, got drunk, killed themselves, whatever. And I've been fortunate enough to keep doing the things that I was supposed to be doing. And the chapter that saved my butt was chapter 5. I found out something about alcoholism, from Bill's story, and I identified with a lot of it. And I found out something more. There's a solution, which I didn't have a clue what the solution was going to be, or even what Alcoholics Anonymous was going to do for me. I was told that if you came to AA, you may get sober and you may be able to stay sober. And that's what I knew of it. So anyhow, more about alcoholism, I found out more. We agnostics, I found out something more, that there was a power greater than myself and I wasn't it. And then I got into chapter 5, in which is where I swear up and down to save my butt. And I think that in most cases, people read it as a novel instead of a textbook. And this whole book was written precisely for you and I, for us kind of people. And our co-founders had the wisdom to put in here, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Why did they put the word thoroughly in there? Because they didn't want us to take any shortcuts. And it went on. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders. I could have been one of them when I was saturated with booze. Some of them are naturally incapable of developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. I couldn't be honest. I didn't know what the honesty was. I didn't know what the truth were. And I come in here and I started hearing people say that they were in denial. And I thought, why would they be in denial? I didn't know what the truth was. And if I'm going to be in denial, I have to know what the truth is in order to deny it. So I started asking questions. And I found out that the opposite of denial is delusional. And that's where I was. And I had to find a way to find out why I was the kind of guy I was. I wasn't prejudiced. I hated everybody equally. And I wasn't afraid to tell you so. You know, and chapter 5 goes on and it says our stories disclosed in a general way. What it used to be like, what happened, and what it's like now. I hear so many speakers talking for 40 minutes on a drunkalog, 2.5 or 3 minutes on what happened, and 37 seconds or whatever on how they're staying sober now. That's not what I'm here for. There isn't a soul on the screen that I'm looking at, I'm positive, that doesn't know what it's like to be drunk, that doesn't know what it's like to be on your hands and knees puking in the toilet bowl every morning, to be hung over, to be fired, on and on and on. You know, and I'm not asking anybody to put up your hands and identify with me. Please don't do that. And then it goes on to say, if you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length, why did they put that in there? Because they knew what they were like and they knew what they were prepared to do. Half measures avail us nothing. Why was that put in there? Here are the steps we took. At some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way. I don't think we could. My thinking got me here. My thinking could take me out of here if I fail to keep doing the things I'm supposed to be doing. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. They're starting to repeat how the necessity of being fearless and thorough. You know, remember that rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. And then it says, remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, and powerful. How did it warp our minds? You know, I was led through the big book by my sponsor. I guess I better stop and explain that. We were invited up to his house one night, and I seen something when I walked in the house that I wanted. He was married, had 2 little kids. He walked in the door, and those 2 little kids come running to him, and he scooped them both up at the same time, give them a big hug, and they give Daddy a big hug and give him a kiss and said goodnight, and he put him down the way they went. His wife come around the corner, wrapped her arms around him, and give him a kiss right in front of us. And I thought, man, I want some of this. Not from her, but I wanted that kind of life at home. After everybody else had drank their coffee and we'd had another meeting after the meeting, everybody else left. And I said, Garnet, would you be my temporary sponsor? And why I asked him to be my temporary sponsor, I don't know. But he gave me the stupidest look I have ever seen on a man's face. And I'm going to quote what he said. What in hell do you want a temporary sponsor for? And he paused. He said, are you looking for temporary sobriety? And I said, no, I don't want temporary sobriety. I want to get sober. I want to stay sober. He said, good. I will sponsor you. You're going to have to do the things that I had to do, the things that my sponsor had to do, the things that his sponsor had to do. And this went on and on and on. He said, are you prepared to do that? And I said, you tell me what to do and I'll do it. And he told me that he was going to take us through this book. I was going to read it. And when I understood what a chapter said, I was to phone him. And we would discuss it, or we would get together for a coffee and discuss what I had read in that chapter. If he was satisfied I knew what was in that chapter, he'd tell me to read the next chapter. If he wasn't happy, he told me to reread the last chapter I just read because there was some stuff I missed. And this is the way I got taken. He didn't sit down and read the book to me, and it more likely wouldn't have made any difference. My mind can only absorb so much at one time. I'm not an educated person. I got thrown out of school when I was in grade 9 for being drunk in class. The principal of the school just had no sense of humor at all. And he took an offense to me being drunk. Anyhow, when we got into working on the steps finally, when I made a geographical move and got into a group that took us through 12 steps in 14 weeks. No ifs, no buts, no maybes, no excuses. You either did the steps as they went through them, or you found a different group. And I thought, what in hell did I just do? I can't do 14 or 12 steps in 14 weeks. There's no way. Well, I'll tell you a little secret. I did, with the help of many people and a good sponsor. I knew I was an alcoholic. I had no problem with that. I knew my life was unmanageable because everything I'd ever done, I'd screwed up, made a mess of it, or whatever terminology you want to put on it. I'm part native. I believe in nature. So I knew there was something out there. Didn't really understand what it is, still don't. And I was told here a long time ago that if you ever get to understand God, you will become Him. And I don't want that to happen. So I don't understand all the stuff there is about God and His nature and all the rest of the stuff. My sponsor said to me, if you have trouble believing that there is a power greater than you, take your left hand and put it on the bottom of your right wrist and tell me what you feel. I said, a pulse. Good, he said. What did you have to do with that? That pulse was beating long before you were even born. So if you think there's no power, why is it beating? A little while later, and I'm still debating this higher power stuff. And that background I've got in my picture of the Northern Lights was another thing that he introduced me to. My phone rang one night. He said, go look outside. Being a drunk, I looked left, I looked right, and I looked down. Never saw nothing. Come back in. He said, what do you see? And I said, nothing. And the phone went dead. A little while later, he phoned me and he said, go look outside. So I did. I went out, I looked left and right and down, come back in. He said, what do you see? And I said, nothing. He said, did you look up? No. He said, go outside and look up. So I did. I saw the Northern Lights. They were absolutely beautiful, dancing around the sky in all different colors and all kinds of stuff. I come in and picked up the phone and I said, I just saw the Northern Lights. And he said, and what did you have to do with them? Click. And the phone went dead. Okay, there's a message here somewhere. I had nothing to do with that. So I got to believe in a power. And which brings us into step three. And, I thought originally step three was nothing. It was just make a decision. Either you make it or you don't. I've found out since that there is much more to step three than just a simple decision. When we get into that third step prayer, and it says, God, I offer myself to thee. I offer. I don't give it, I just offer it. It's still my life, but I'm offering it to you to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. In other words, Len, get out of the way. I will take control of your life from here on in. I will be the director and you will be an actor or a laborer or whatever you want to call it. And then it says, relieve me of the bondage of self. That means to get out of my way, out of my big ego, so that I may better do his will. It says thy will. So that means his will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them, that may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. And this is the road that I've been walking for the last 56 years and 8 days. Trying to carry this message to the alcoholic who still suffers. Not a drunk, but an alcoholic who still suffers. And there may be people on the screen today that may be suffering from something. Not every day I'm a spiritual giant, but don't ever think that. I've never reached that plateau yet. Hope I never do. But when I got it out of God's way and let him be the director, and started to let me know what I should be doing, and I set forth to start doing it. And there's no amen at the end of the third step prayer. That means we're not done. In order to find out what my will of my life was all about, I had to do my fourth step. And when I found out what my will in my life was all about, I found out why I hated people. I found out why I was not a well-liked individual. And it all had to do with the stuff that was in my head that was alcohol driven. So when I found out everything there was about Len, it was suggested to me that I do my fifth step with my sponsor. And I wasn't going to do that. Oh, excuse me. So I was going to go to a man of the cloth. And I got an appointment and I drove over to see him. And he happened to be the same guy that married me and my wife in July of 1966. And this is now about 4 years later, almost 4 years later. And we sat down and we just had a general chat. And then I got into my fifth step. And I didn't get very far into it. And I've done some bad things. And I started telling him about one of these things that I had done. And he started slapping his chest and gasping for air. And I thought, my God, he's going to die. He's going to have a heart attack. I just clammed up, thanked him for his time, got up and left. On my way back home, I thought I'd stop and see if my sponsor was home. He was. He said, well, what's on your mind today, Len? And I said, well, I guess I got to talk to you about my fifth step. He said, oh, finally, come on in. So I told him the experience I'd just had with this man of the cloth. And he said, well, come on in, he said, and try me. So I sat down and told him my story, withholding nothing. And he sat there and he listened, he scratched his head a little bit every once in a while. I got all done, and he looked at me. He said, "That's it." I said, "Yeah." Huh. Said, "I thought you were worse than that." That kind of surprised me. I thought I was bad enough, but he thought maybe I might have should have been worse or whatever. And I said, "No." I said, "That as far as I know at this point in time, that's it." And thank God this book is so precise. It talks about a business that takes no regular inventory. Further down the same page, it says, we did exactly the same thing. I make it a point of doing an inventory on a yearly basis, normally right in and around my sobriety birthday. I don't go back into my past unless there is something that surfaces, that comes up, that is still bugging me. And if it is, then I'll include it in my next inventory. So throughout the years, I've done many fourths and many fifths. I've just got finished doing another one with my sponsor, and it's not a long drawn out thing anymore, because I'll get into that later. But when I got done my fifth step, he sent me home and said, "Now you go home and you review everything that you have done." And I did. I went home and literally redid all my first four steps to make sure that I hadn't left anything out. It took some time, but I was comfortable that I was ready to carry on. Our sixth step says that we are entirely ready. Am I entirely ready to learn how to hold stuff with an open hand? Because God will never take anything away from me if I'm holding it in a clenched fist. And he'll take it away about this far, just enough that I've got to reach to get it back. And some days it's mine and some days it's his. Some days it's back and forth, his mind, and so on and so forth. And then I finally, admit complete defeat and let go of it and let him have it. And when I do that, I can free myself and get back into a spiritual condition. And step 7, where it says humbly. Again, on my knees, in the presence of my sponsor. I humbly ask God to remove my shortcomings. And why do they have shortcomings and defects of characters both listed? Because they're both the same thing. My sponsor told me I needed 2 books, a big book, a dictionary, and one other thing, a mirror. I thought, why do I need a mirror? Being as smart as I was at the time, I asked him, why do I need a mirror? Because he said, anytime you're agitated, upset, or pissed off at somebody, look in the mirror, because you'll be looking at the problem on a. Okay, point taken. So I let go of a whole lot of stuff. And I had to make a list in step 8. I took the majority of my names out off my 4th step and put them in my 8th step. And then I had to become willing to make the amends. And that's all step 8 says. Made a list and become willing. How do you become willing? How did I become willing? I continued to ask God as I understand him, or understood him at that point of time, to remove these things and give me the courage to go and do the things that I had to do. And number one on my list was my father. I hated that man with a passion. I was 15 years old. I come home drunk one night. My mother met me at the door and she said, "Where have you been?" I'm not going to tell you people what I told her. You can fill in the blanks. I told her it was none of her business. And my father stepped around the corner of the door, and asked me if I'd care to repeat that. He was a big man. He stood about 6'2" and weighed about 260 pounds, and it was solid muscle. He reached out and he grabbed me by the shoulders and picked me up, and he brought me up just about to touch nose to nose. And he said, "You are disgusting." And he threw me. And I landed about 15 feet away in about 4 feet of snow in southern Saskatchewan. And I looked up, and there he is standing there, all 6'2" and 260 pounds. He didn't look like that before he threw me. I instantly zippered my mouth shut, went in the house, and went downstairs. I've never forgot that. I lost that man when I was 11 years sober. And I had to go and stand by the casket. And I went over everything that was in my being to make sure that he was going to leave with me withholding anything from him. Even though he wouldn't hear me, I knew what I was going to do, and I did. And thank God I did. There was literally nothing that I had not cleaned up in my past with him. And we had developed a father-son relationship from the time I was about 18 months sober until the time of his passing, which was about 9.5 years. So that was priceless to me. When I got ready to make those amends, I was living in Prince Albert, so I had to go to Weyburn, Saskatchewan, which is, I don't know, 3.5, 4 hour drive. I drove down there. Every time I got there, I was convinced he didn't want to see me. And I almost turned around and drove home, but I didn't. I stopped, knocked on the door. Mother answered the door, and she said, "Len's here. Should I let him in?" And he said, "Yeah, I guess so." So I went in and him and I sat in the living room, and I told him why I was there, and he sat there and just listened. A little while later, Mom poked her head around the corner and said, "It's lunchtime. Should I put on an extra plate?" And Dad said, "Yes, do so." So we stopped and had lunch, had a cup of coffee, and I was ready to say my goodbyes and get out of there. And Dad came over and put his arms around me and gave me a hug and said, "Just keep doing what you're doing. I don't know what it is," but he said, "Keep doing it. You're a hell of a lot better guy now than you have been in the past." And that meant the world to me, because that's the first time he ever put his arms around me that I can remember. And I've continued to clean up the wreckage of my past. And step 10 brings me to a place that I think I'm totally different than a lot of people. A lot of people read the book and it says, "When we retire at night, we constructively review our day." They say they do their step 10 when it's bedtime. If I waited until I went to bed to start making my amends for the day and cleaning up the wreckage of my past, I'd owe somebody else another amend tomorrow morning for me waking them up. at 1 or 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning when I'm ready to go to bed. So I start my step 10 in the morning when I wake up. And as I go through the day, I can constantly, if I screw up, I stop and fix it. I stop and clean up the wreckage. At that point, I rectify the problem. And I'm sorry is not an amend. Somebody said I'm sorry to me, I'd more likely slap them because it means nothing. I've heard and I've said it. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I was always sorry for something. Saying I'm sorry is not an amend. It's cleaning up the wreckage of your past, changing your ways. When I changed from the guy I used to be to the guy I am now, from a guy that hated everybody to the guy that's got feelings of love, feelings of compassion, feeling of caring for people. This is what you're seeing here today is me with a compassion for people. I love you. I don't care, men, women, whoever. If you're in this fellowship, you're great, keep doing it. Saw through prayer and meditation. 10, 11, and 12, I keep hearing our maintenance steps. You look up the word maintenance in a dictionary and see what it says. It says to keep in good repair. If you want to stay where you're at in your program, that's fine. You do so. I want to continue to grow. 10, 11, and 12 are all growth steps. So when I continue to take a personal inventory and I make me amends and keep my list, I'm growing. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve my understanding of God as I understand Him. If I keep improving it, I can stay on a spiritual plane. Some days that spiritual plane's down here, some days it's up here. It depends totally on my spiritual condition. Am I humble enough every morning to get on my knees and thank God for another day? I start my day by doing that. And there's a piece in the book. It says, upon awakening, this is the things we do. It's on page 86. If you don't know where it is, read it and do it. Don't just read it, but physically do it. I renew my third step prayer every morning. I offer myself to God, and then I get out of His way so He can do what He has to do with me. And then we continue to try to carry this message. This is my big book, and this is the message that we are missing in many cases. I don't know what your recovery rate is where you people are. In Canada, it's below 5%. 95% of the people coming to Alcoholics Anonymous is not getting the message. So are we literally killing people by using my story, your story, our story, instead of this message? It makes me wonder if we are being responsible for letting people kill themselves. One summer, we had 5 young people. And I say young because they were considerably younger than I am. I just turned 80 years old. Thank God I made it this far. Well, we had 5 young people, all under the age of 50, commit suicide one way or another. 3 of them were direct alcohol deaths. Another one was possibly alcoholic death due to a car accident. It was never confirmed the fact that the driver was drunk, but knowing him the way I knew him, he quite likely was. Yeah. There was one young lady that had two beautiful young daughters, drank herself to death, went into an alcoholic seizure, and never came out of it. 43 years old. How do you live with that? I spent hours trying to talk her into doing the steps. Her remark was to me, I am not doing those effing steps. Here just a little while ago, we had a young lady come into our group, sat down in the chair beside an empty chair beside me and said, "Can I ask you some questions?" And I said, "Of course." She said, "What do I have to do to get this program?" And I said, "Well, first of all," I said, "do you understand what a program is?" "No." I said, "Well, according to my dictionary, it says a program is a set of principles in which we learn how to live by. And I got those principles by doing the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous." She in turn turned around and said that I am not doing those effing steps. Got up and left the meeting. You can be honest with people, and if they don't like it, you've done your job. You've told them the truth. You know, I can't say enough about what Alcoholics Anonymous has did for me. You know, I said that I got married in July of 1966 to a lady that gave me an ultimatum. I am still married to that same lady today. In July 16th this year, we'll celebrate 59 years of marriage. Because of that marriage, I have a 51-year-old daughter. I have a 49-year-old son. I have a son-in-law that's 53, a daughter-in-law that's 46, 47. And that date that you see on my screen is the most important date there is in my life, bar nothing. More important than my belly button birthday, more important than my wife's birthday, my kids' birthdays, any date in the world. That date is more important to me. I keep hearing stuff on here, but working. Live the program. Once you get your steps done, live them. It is so valuable. You know, you can spend the rest of your life improving on what you've already done by living the program a day at a time. It's not a work process. I think that's maybe another problem why we got so many people that's not staying. They keep hearing work, and they're too lazy to work or to whatever, I don't know. But if you live it, when you wake up in the morning and open your eyes, ask God for help, do the things it says to do on page 86, 87, 88. Live it. It works. There's three of the most important words in the big book. On the very top of page 112, three words. Read them. And if you don't know what they are, open your book to page 112 and read the first three words that's on the top of that page. It says, it works. Read this book is the words. Read this book. Fantastic. And thanks again for letting me share. I want to thank you people for letting me share a little bit of my experience, strength, and hope with you. If you got something out of it, great. I didn't see too many people leave, so thank you again.
Len, that was absolutely fantastic. You said to me there the other day that the big book is your way of doing it. And what you were telling there was my story. Because I went up to a guy one night, but I'd gone up to him a few nights. And he said to me, what do you do if you get a new television or video? I said, you sit it up on the counter and play around with it for a while. He said, I know. So what do you do after a half an hour? I said, I'd get the instruction manual to find out how it works. And at that, he grabbed his crutch. He was crippled. I thought he was going to hit me, but he didn't. He swung around in his chair and he picked up something and he threw it at me. He said, there's the instruction manual, Massey. He threw the big book at me. He said, if you want to get sober, this is how you do it. If you don't now, he says, take your misery and net walk out of here. I didn't much like the way he spoke to me, but I didn't want to leave either. And he said to me, I want you to read a line until you know what's in the line. Read a paragraph until you know what's in the paragraph. And read no more than a page a day. But I had to know what was inside the page every single day for him. And I wasn't allowed to go from one sentence to another in the next page. I wasn't allowed to turn the page until tomorrow. He promised me life beyond my wildest dreams. And I lived that today. If I don't choke my wife between now and the 11th of August, the 10th of August, we'll be 40 years married. My daughter's 40 years of age, and my wife is 60, all within 3 weeks. This works. I learned how to be a father, how to be a son, how to be a husband. It's funny, when my father died when I was 11 years sober. My mother died when I was 10 years sober. And I'm glad I was sober I made amends. So I appreciate your story, and I got a lot of identification from it. Anyway, I love being sober. Over to my good friend, Mick DeFerra.
Thank you, Mossy. Thank you for sharing. My name's Mick and I am an alcoholic, and it's only by the grace of God and this fellowship that I'm sober today. You know, Len, I loved your story. I loved how you went through the 12 steps, and you reminded me of my second sponsor. Our first one was a lady, and she was too kind to me, I thought. So I chose someone I liked in the meeting. And I asked him if he'd be my sponsor, and he said yes. And every time I used to say, yes, but, he used to walk away from me. And, and all my sponsors, I've had 4 sponsors, and they've all died sober. I've never left none. They've just died on me. Now I call my new sponsor my mentor, because just to see if he'll live longer, and But this fellowship has given me everything I need in life. I like you. My higher power is the nature. I've always loved nature, always been fascinated by it. I love the stars and looking up into the sky. I've never thought about, if my higher power's up there or down there. I just feel what I see. And that's been the greatest thing. And you're on about your, amends to your parents. I had this ease in me as a child, and when I took a drink, that was the solution to the pain I had, and the uncomfortability of life I found, and I blamed everyone and everything, and my parents. I hear people say, they had a traumatic childhood. My parents had a traumatic parenthood. They didn't drink and that. But in this fellowship, I've been back in my past, and I've been to my parents, And at first I said to my mother, I'm sorry for all the harm I gave you as a child, as a teenager, and as a drunk. And she just turned around to me and she said, Mick, you stay in your club and I'll be the happiest woman in the world. And I've done my amends by always trying to be there when they needed me, you know, because sorry isn't enough. I done that in my drinking to my wife and everything, you know. And then, you know, my wife, I used to be okay in meetings, but what was I like indoors? I had to learn to take everything I learned in the meetings in my house, to my children, to my wife. And our relationship went from love, well, I think it was lust when I first met her. Then it went to love when I was in this fellowship, to when before she died, she used to say to me, we're soulmates, Mick. She was an Al-Anon member for 40 years. And she died as a member of Al-Anon. And we both grew through both fellowships. And I had a daughter in Alateen, you know, and she'd never even see me take a drink. But she said to her mum one day, Mum, can I go to Alateen? And she said, yes, if you want to, but I cannot sit in there with you. And it was because she was being bullied at school. And she saw how these programs were working, and she said she wanted to go there. You know, I'm one of the luckiest people in the world, I believe, because today I like who I am. You know, I don't love me all the time. I have a daughter-in-law I don't like, but I love her because she makes my son happy. And when my wife died, I told her that I'd have her ashes and my ashes mixed together, and we'd be spread across the bluebells as she wanted, you know, and that's what it is going to be. Len, thank you, and thank you again for your share. It really moved me, and it's making me look deeper in me. And Katrina is going to read the promises.
Hi everybody, I am Katrina and I am an alcoholic. Thank you, Mick. Thank you, Massey, for your service. And thank you, Len. It was absolutely beautiful to listen to you. Absolutely beautiful. I've learned so much from you. Thank you, my love. So the AA promises. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They're being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them.
Thank you, Katrina. And thanks everyone that done service. Kathleen on the timekeeper. Jackie done the preamble. Mick is my sidekick, although it's him I'd like to kick. And Len, fantastic job this evening, and thanks everyone for joining us. And the yellow card, who you see here?
What you hear here,
When you leave here.
let it stay here.
And Chap will be enabled just to close the meeting, guys, with the surrender prayer. And Len, would you lead us out with the surrender prayer? And again, thanks a million for a fantastic meeting.
Thank you. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change.
The
The
courage to
Courage
change
to
that I
change
can.
things I
And
can, and the
the
wisdom
wisdom
to
to know the
know the difference.
God
Keep
bless.
coming back.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.
That was a
Thank you.
lovely meeting.
Yeah.